Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. I hope you enjoy this video, and if you do, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. So today, we are trying to get the platinum for Black Myth Wukong. The game starts out with us playing his son Wukong, who was confronting the Celestial Core after he'd been offered a position within it. Wukong turned it down in favour of a quiet life on a mountain. Fearing it was another act of rebellion, the gods sent an army to attack Wukong's followers.
Foul monkey! Taste my axe!
He was angered by this and went to fight Erlang, but unfortunately, Erlang used a spell to tighten the golden headband. Using it against Wukong caused him extreme pain. Unable to continue on fighting, Wukong was defeated and turned back into stone on top of a mountain.
And so ends the last tale of Sun Wukong.
This is then where our journey as the Destined One begins. We were tasked with finding all 6 relics, and it is here that we earn our first trophy of the game. Home is behind. And so, Chapter 1 begins. This chapter takes place in the Black Wind Mountains. Soon after transforming from a peach, we swiftly move on to taking out these 2 Yaoguais. Continuing on up the path, we reach our first shrine. This would come in really handy, as it's basically this game's version of a campfire. Further on up, we reach our first boss of the game, the Bull Guard. After getting him to about half health, we're given our first spell of the game, Immobilize. So after that, we continue to beat on him and we quickly take him down. After taking him out, we earn some sparks, and that enables us to level up, which grabs us another trophy, a Spark of Thought. Next up, we find the first meditation spot, and in order to get the platinum, we would be needing to find a total of 24 locations to unlock a specific trophy. We then ran into this boss. This one didn't prove to be too much trouble, and we took him down on the first try. The same can't be said for the next boss, the Wandering Wight, where quite a few attempts ended like this. After a handful of tries, we were finally able to beat him and earn his spirit. This guy was next to face our mate. He seemed really scary, but was actually a big pushover, and we defeated him easily on the first try. Along the path to the next boss, we encountered 2 NPCs, which would turn out to be quite important throughout the playthrough, requiring us to exhaust all dialogue with them in each chapter. After we saved this little monkey guy from one of those snake heads, he gives us a chance to upgrade our gourd and brew some soaks. This then nabbed us another trophy, the Brew of Bravery. This is where we meet the first of the 6 frog bosses. After literally being kicked in the face, we seem to take him out fairly easily. Next up, this dude is easily the hardest boss of Chapter 1. When I first tried it, I seemed to be able to take him down, no problem. The only issue was that this was the first boss I'd encountered in the game to have 2 phases, and the second phase really didn't go to plan. It took me so many attempts to finally be able to beat him, and after what felt like hours, I finally got there.
Thing you truly seek.
So in order to reach this next boss, you would have to make sure that you'd rung all of the 3 bells in the previous boss arenas. That would then enable you to be transported into a secret area of the game where we would be able to take on Elder Jinshi. This guy wasn't too difficult, as he was basically a copy and paste of the Wandering Wight we'd fought earlier on, just with a few extra tricks up his sleeves. Defeating him, however, got us another trophy, the Temple of Taint. Next up was the Black Wind King. This dude was a little tricky with his shape-shifting, but on the second try, we sent him back to where he came from. That is until we had to find him again. Only now he was a beefed up teddy bear with anger issues and lots of fire. Beating him in this form, however, wasn't really much harder than the previous time we fought him. Only now, we ended up with not only the blazing Black Wind trophy, but with the first of our 6 relics too, Craven Eyes.
Well, just step in. Get more shots and you'll be high and dry.
Shortly after that amazing song, we meet Zoo Dog, who gave us the ability to craft medicine, giving us our next trophy of the game, Creative Concoction. Just around the corner from him was the next frog boss, and the one that, in all honesty, gave me the most problem of the game. I barely scraped by on this one, I was so lucky. Just through these doors is these 2 guys, the second Rat Prince and the King of Flowing Sand. The trick to this one is that you need to kill the daddy rat first in order to make sure that you get his spirit. Luckily, I found this out before the fight, so I managed to take the daddy rat out with no problems. But that made the sun really angry and he took his attacks to a whole new level. But after a swift dodge and a strong bonk on the head, he was finally down. This guy down here happened to be the big brother of the other prince that we just fought earlier, and after luring him out with a juicy chunk of meat, he rises from the depth. Despite his intimidating size though, he was actually a big pushover, and we took him out fairly quickly. So this wall here is actually really important, and you need to either get the big rat guy to break it down for you, or use a spirit ash to crack a hole in the wall. Once you do, you'll find a chest hidden inside that contains a long scale, and this would be needed to access some secret bosses. So, after opening that, I decided, why not try and take on the Black Long of Chapter 2? Everything was going great until he decided to have a temper tantrum. He was sending out waves of electricity, and no matter what I did, I just couldn't seem to avoid it. I died over and over again. That is, until I realised you could just stand on one of these rocks and watch the tantrum from a distance. Once it was over, we went back to bonking him on the head and quickly defeated him. The Red Long was hidden behind a waterfall all the way back in Chapter 1. But thankfully, this guy was nothing compared to the Black Long that we just fought, and we managed to take him down easily on the first try. The next couple of bosses along our path were really not too much trouble and were all taken out easily on the first try.
Bloody hell. What's the hold up this time? Suck your offerings and don't breed more rats. Where'd you come from, you bird-faced mug? Who cares anyway? I'll gobble you up first.
Next up was the Tiger Vanguard. This was a menacing looking tiger who was surrounded by a pool of blood. At first you might be thinking, this guy looks tough. And you'd be right, because he really is. He wiped the floor with me so many times. After lots of failed attempts, I finally managed to get the hang of this guy and gave him that final bonk on the head that was needed to defeat him once and for all. It was now time to be greeted by the Headless Man again. Only this time, he granted us the Rock Solid spell.
This body of yours is perfect for the art of rock solid.
Here was a bridge where the tiger's acolyte was hiding. This guy absolutely loved to keep throwing me off the edge of the bridge, but after a couple of tries, I finally managed to defeat him. The yellow-robed squire, we found him earlier on, just sat by a rock rather drunk, but after sobering him up and doing a couple of little bits, we managed to get the chance to fight him, and this time he rewards us by opening a secret area, and this area would contain something that would be very important and helpful for defeating the end boss of this chapter. We now come across another Tiger Vanguard, however this one was definitely a pussycat compared to the other one that we fought, and he seemed to go down without any issues. So next we move on to this strange guy. He needed somebody to bang on a drum in order for him to rise from the sand, and once that had happened, he sure enough did rise from the sand, and he didn't really prove too much of an issue. Just a couple of well-timed dodges and we were on to phase 2, where he laid on the floor and we had to retrieve the vessel that was on his back, and I thought, is this really it? Have I actually defeated this boss so easily? But no, of course that wasn't it. But this time, however, we were 2 against 1 and quickly took him out with no issues whatsoever, earning us the Shifting Sands trophy. Here's where we used the little RAL drum that we found earlier. This summoned a little boy who went and jumped down a well. So we followed after him and there was no sign of the little boy, but there was a mad tiger there. This guy is what I'm guessing happened to the little boy's dad. This guy didn't take too many tries to get down, and for our trouble we were rewarded with his spirit. Now we were on to the final boss of chapter 2, the Yellow-Winged Sage. This guy was definitely a test. That is until I realised you could use the wind tamer on him. That interrupted his little whirlwind attack and made finally defeating him a lot easier. So we managed to defeat him, grabbing us the Great Gust trophy and our second relic. Now moving on to chapter 3, where we were greeted by this guy, and it would turn out that he would haunt us through the majority of this chapter, the Macaque Chief. We finally get the chance to beat his ass, but he runs off halfway through the battle. Our little Buddha friend from the beginning of this chapter pulls this boss out of his bag, so we quickly smacked that one out the way and we were greeted yet again by the Macaque Chief. Only this time it turns out he would be transporting us to what is easily the worst part of the game, the Pagoda Realm. Within this realm, you would be greeted by these weird lantern-headed guys, and for one of the trophies, we would have to take out all 9 of them before defeating the final boss of the area, in order to obtain one of the really rare curios. Unfortunately, however, I seem to have miscounted, and I only took out 8 on the first try, so I'd have to go back in New Game Plus in order to clear that up. So here we have the first of the 2 bosses of this realm. This one just kept teleporting all over the place and was really annoying to fight. This next guy, however, he was actually really easy. Despite looking worse, you just smack his legs and then when he falls to the floor, just beat on his head and the fight's soon over. So surprise, surprise, we meet the Macaque Chief again for the 3rd time, only this time he was terrorizing the old man we'd met earlier, and we certainly weren't going to stand for that, so we quickly defeated him. But yet again, that wasn't it, and he just teleported away. But this time, we got ourselves the Ring of Fire spell. Here's where we meet the human form of the weird dragon that we fought on the lake earlier. This one didn't prove to be too much trouble, but she soon transformed herself back into the dragon that we'd fought earlier and tried to make a run for it. We managed to jump on her back and send her crashing to the floor, but not before crashing into the symbol which contained one of Wukong's oldest friends.
Constipation!
Just around the corner was this guy. He proved a little bit of a problem, but on the second try, we managed to take him out with no problems. We took a trip on a turtle over to the mainland, where we'll be taking out this bat guy, the non-white, and finally, this long guy. However, this guy was different to the other guys that we'd fought. He turned out to be a friendly NPC who was just in need of some help. So after giving him one of Zoodog's resurrection pills, he gave us a map taking us to a whole new area of the game where all the merchants would all be together. Once here, we find Yin Tiger, and he would help us in upgrading our armor, which unlocked us a new trophy, Pound and Perfect. After that, we challenge him to a duel. And of course we win. After that, he was so angry that he threw his weapon at us, granting us a new spell. Quickly moving on, we harvest some seeds for yet another trophy. Happy harvest. The third frog guy was no issue, and he was easily taken out, along with the old ginseng guy and the non-able. We then came across this guy, which required a few steps in order to fight him, but he really wasn't that difficult once you got past his party tricks of spinning fire wheels. This guy was the only thing that stood between us and the Thunderclap Temple, so we quickly bonked him on the head and moved on through. Earlier on, we found this corpse, and they told us a very sad story about how their life had come to an end. This fox turned out to be the same one from the cutscene at the end of chapter 2, where this guy takes in the injured fox and nurses it back to health, but after a terrible dream, he gets scared and kills the fox. Wanting revenge for the fox though, we agreed to help him and we took out the non-void. Now we only had 2 more bosses before the final one of the chapter, the non-pure and the monk from the sea. And finally, it was time for the last boss of chapter 3, Yellowbrow. His first phase went down without a hitch, but he soon sucked us up, put us in his pouch and dumped us in the bottom of it. And it was there where we met up again with Zubaji. Only this time, we were both tasked with taking out the macaque chief. Finally, once and for all, we managed to take him down, but Yellowbrow now transformed us into him. We then had to navigate our way along this little path until we could finally get a chance to defeat Yellowbrow again. Getting a few hits in as the macaque chief, we then transformed back to ourselves. We managed to take him out, and we finally gained ourselves the nifty nonsense trophy. Defeated, he then wanders off out of the hut and into the water where he falls through the ice, before we're greeted by a goldfish, giving us our third relic of the game, Hubris Nose. Chapter 4 was up next, and this one starts off in the village. After beating a few enemies, Zubaji transforms us into these pig dudes to act as a disguise so that we could just sneak right in. As it turned out though, this girl was wearing her own disguise, and she saw right through us, transforming herself back into her spider form. The second sister was the first boss fight of this chapter, and we took her down with no issue. But she wasn't about to let us win that easily, and as she makes a hasty retreat, she fires one last shot at our friend, embedding a needle in him. We then run after her and jump down a hole, only to awaken in a whole new area, the Webbed Hollow. We then find a rather large cocoon swinging about. After giving it a couple of hits, it transforms into the Venom Taoist, which after taking off his arms would drop as one of the armor parts that was required for the trophy. Now it was time for the Yellow Long. This is the boss that gave me the most trouble out of the entire game, taking me over 2 hours to finally beat him. Felt like a lifetime, we finally beat him and earned ourselves the Sire and Sons trophy. Next up was the 4th frog boss, and this one went down nice and easy.
What on earth? It was one merry night, and now she wants to take my life.
After being hit with the needle earlier on, Zubaji was now under the control of the enemy. Unfortunately, we had no choice but to defeat him if we were going to have any hopes of getting our friend back. The first encounter with him was pretty straightforward. After his defeat, he then flies away to a different location. This time, we would have to fight him again, only now he had 2 phases, and we would have to fight him in his pig form too. Fighting in this mud made it really difficult to dodge some of his attacks. After defeating him, we finally managed to save our friend, releasing him from the control that the needle had on him. Unfortunately, that delight didn't last long as he was soon whipped away by a web. It turned out that that web belonged to one of his former lovers, the Violet Spider. Turns out she was rather mad that he'd slipped away before she had chance to devour him. Angered by the fact that Baji had more loyalty to a monkey than herself, she tried to get rid of us once and for all. Unfortunately for her, however, we were able to take her down without too much of a fuss. After being defeated, she made a swift retreat, releasing a swarm of spiderlings to run after us. Running for our lives, we stumble on the cliff edge as it crumbles beneath our feet. When it seems like all is lost, we're rescued by the only good spider of the bunch. After that, it was time to take on the Supreme Inspector. This was a strange fight as it was really short. He quickly flew away, but not before informing us that he turned the only good spider into a consumable pill. It was time to take on the Venom Taoist again. Apparently, having less arms made this guy now more of a challenge. Once defeated, he told us to grab the needle from Purple Cloud Mountain. Assuming it was important, we headed straight there. Once there, we quickly came across a drunk scorpion on a roof. This guy got really mad at us when we started smashing open his drink, and he came down to fight us. This was another fight that seemed a lot harder than the others, and it took me a fair while to be able to get the better of him. After him, we then took on the Taoist Me, who despite his 2 phases was a complete pushover compared to the scorpion boss we had just fought. Once he was defeated, this snake woman tells us that her husband is just up the hill, and being unwilling to kill him herself, she asked us to do it for her.
I've watched him grow up. I cannot bring myself to do it.
Now it was time to face the Duskvale. This was the snake lady's husband, who had been transformed into this terrifying creature. After beating his first phase, he gets even worse, turning the sky a blood red and becoming even more deadly. Taking him down grabbed us our 10th trophy, the Cockerel Crowed. We are then rejoined by the Snake Lady, who thanks us for finally freeing her husband from his terrible fate. As a thank you, she takes the needle from us and restores its power. A power that we would certainly be needing for the next boss.
I shall help you and restore its power. Consider this as my token of gratitude.
You must save me.
We find the Violet Spider yet again, only this time she was begging for her life. Ignoring her pleas for help, he takes the one thing that was keeping her alive for all of this time. Using it for himself, he turns into this monstrosity known as the 100-Eyed Taoist. Furious, the Spider Sisters team up with me and we try to take down this guy. That is until he turns the sky gold and tries to transform himself. This is the part where the enchanted needle comes in. It disables his power and leaves him vulnerable to attack, meaning we can finally take this guy down for good, grabbing us the Behold the Betrayal trophy. After defeating him, the Violet Spider is left to die in the arms of her daughters. It is then we earn our 4th relic, Envious Tongue. It's then on to Chapter 5, where we're thrust straight into the action, having to take on a horde of the undead. Shortly on up the path, we come across the Pale-Axe Stalwart, who quickly realises who we are and stops fighting. He then gives us a task to take out all of the cart bosses before returning to him later. We now stumble upon this captured fox, who seems to recognise us. After defeating these 2 strange bosses, we manage to free the fox, and she informs us that she's actually the daughter of the Bull King. Baji seems suspicious of her and tells us not to believe her, but we decide to follow on after her anyway.
Follow me!
There's then a quick little fight in the lava with the Flint Chief before we head on to find the old man again, who this time asked us for a level 9 god. After presenting it to the fire, it upgrades to its highest level and gives us the trophy, always accompanied. We now meet the Keeper of Flaming Mountains. He drops some ink on the floor and immediately we are into a boss fight, where the first phase ends with us having to take on the horse guy we have been talking to throughout the game. second phase is where he sends out Yin Yang Fish, and after a few flips and flops, he goes down too. Just around the corner, we have the third car, and this one was certainly more aggressive than the previous two. And now comes the most difficult bit of Chapter 5, trying to get the timing right to run past this strange spiked ball. After numerous failed attempts, I made it past and Baji jumps in to save the day, sacrificing himself to shield us from the ball. The fox girl we met earlier helps to fan the flames as Baji and the ball fly off the edge. It's now where we come to realise that Baji was right not to trust this fox girl. Turns out she really wasn't who she said she was, and she was in fact her brother. She transforms into her real self, and it's now time to take on the red boy. After defeating him, all seems good as the Bull King coughs up our fifth relic, only for the red boy to suddenly wake up and take it before we even get our hands on it. Swallowing it immediately, he sets on fire, and once again, Baji jumps in to save the day by protecting us from the flames. Turns out his mid-death snack aged him 20 years, and we now have to take on the Yaksha King. He was certainly a lot more tough than the previous fight, but this time we had Baji by our side to help. Once we took him down, we earned ourselves the Flaming Fury trophy. Baji rushes over and demands he coughs up the next relic, but it isn't until his mother shows up wielding the plantain fan that he finally gives it over. She then gives us the fan and we finally obtain Chapter 5's relic, Grieved Body. And this then earns us another trophy, Treasure Trove. Chapter 5 wasn't done with yet though. There were still a few more bosses to clear up before we could move on. And the first on that list was the Rusty Gold Carp. When we first encountered this boss, we find the Pale Axe Stalwart from earlier, who was struggling to try and fight this guy. This is where we step in and finish the fight for him. Unfortunately though, we were just a little bit too late to be able to save him, and he fades away before our very eyes. Straight after going through the ice wall, we come across the fifth frog boss, and again this one poses as no problem, and now we have only one left before we get the trophy. We then find the spiked ball that gave us so much trouble earlier on, and it turns out it's not actually a ball at all, but some strange couple in the form of top takes bottom and bottom takes top. This fight wasn't too hard despite having to fight both of them, and we finally got our revenge for all those times that they squished us on the path through here. Then it was time for the final boss of this area, the Bishwi Golden-Eyed Beast, and defeating this one got us the trophy Frost and Flame. Finally, we find the last car, only this time the horse guy was stuck inside of it, and after retrieving his whip, we were given the trophy Urge Unfulfilled. We then grabbed the final meditation spot for the Scenic Seeker trophy. And it's now time for the sixth and final chapter. This one was going to be different from all the previous chapters, as it was more of an open world type area rather than being of the linear design that the previous 5 were. Chapter 6 starts off with us and Baji taking a trip up the mountain before we are shortly stopped by the Supreme Inspector from earlier. Only this time he wasn't going to disappear mid-fight, and it certainly was a tough one. It took numerous attempts to finally get past this one, but in doing so we earned ourselves Wukong's Somersault Cloud, and this would help us greatly in traversing the large area that was Chapter 6. Our first port of call was the Cloud Treading Deer, and defeating this one gave us the first of Wukong's armor set, the Lotus Silk Cloud Treaders. Just around the corner from him was the very last frog guy, Lang Borbo, and after defeating him it earned us the Clamour of Frogs trophy. On our quest for the next armor piece we would now have to take on the Golden Armoured Rhino. Baji took all the credit for winning this fight, and defeating this guy earned us the second armor piece, the chest piece. The next piece of armor was retrieved from snapping the antennae off the Fang-tailed General. Doing this grabbed us the golden Fang-tail crown headpiece. Baji then managed to find the next armor piece being guarded by a mantis. After trying to grab him, the mantis jumps inside his mouth and starts to tear up his insides. With no other way to be able to get rid of the mantis, Baji uses all of his might to transform us into a bug so that we can go inside his body and take out the threat that was the emerald-armed mantis. Defeating this guy not only saves Baji, but also got us our final piece of armor we had left to find, the arm braces. After that, there was only the staff left to find, so we decided to take a detour and do some cleanup before the end. First up was this giant stone guy who was so huge that the only way to hurt him was to bash the blue crystals on his feet. After doing so, he does one final stomp and collapses to the ground, which allows us to walk up his leg, only to find this strange baboon guy pulling an eyeball out of a Buddha-like stone. After passing it on to us, we take it to Zoo Dog and get our next trophy, Medicine Meal. We then head back to Chapter 3 to retrieve the last seed that we needed for our collection, which grabs us the Seeds to Sow trophy. We then decided to wander back to the room that was filled with murals. After entering, we are greeted by the little Buddha guy again. This time he opens up a secret passageway, allowing us to go through and take on one of the hardest bosses in the entire game, Erlang the Sacred Divinity. After taking a bit of his health away, he jumps into the sky and tries to crash down his axe on our head. But after missing, we carry on to fight him some more before he yet again jumps into the sky. Only this time, he was trying to shoot us with these laser-like beams. When he finally comes back down to the ground, we use the fan from Chapter 5 and a good couple of hits to finally take him down. All's not over yet though, as he jumps away, transforming into the bird that we saw at the beginning of the game. Not letting him get away that easily, we also turn into a bird and go on to fight him mid-air. After sending us both back crashing to the ground, they rise again, only this time into giant versions of themselves. We now had to take on the 4 Heavenly Kings before we had a chance to take Erlang down again. Taking those dudes out one by one finally gave us a chance to take on Erlang for the final time. After beating him again, this earned us the Meet the Match trophy. After beating Erlang, we find him defeated lying on the floor. We pick up the spear and attempt to impale him with it. That is until something comes out from his third eye, the whisperings of Wukong. Turns out Erlang had Wukong's mind for all of this time. All of a sudden we are back on the mountain where it all began, only this time we're dressed as Sun Wukong. Erlang then picks up the spear and informs us that our journey is just beginning.
Your journey, though, has just begun.
Before we end up back in the room with all the murals, just like it never happened. We then carried on with our task and came across the last item we needed, Wukong's staff. After picking that up, we earn ourselves the Guardian of Gear trophy. I then went and picked up one more trophy, Fickle Form. It was now time for the final boss of the game, and the only way to get there would be to go through this stone egg. After going into the egg, we are met straight away by the monkey that we saw at the beginning of the game, and he takes us on a boat ride through what seems to be Wukong's mind and his journey through the west. Shortly along the river, we see a mirror image of ourselves sailing by, indicating that this hasn't been the first attempt, and that many more destined ones have taken the exact same journey that we just have.
Here, we can venture forth with you no further. This task is yours alone.
The old monkey informs us that Wukong left behind a broken shell of his former self, one without all of his 6 senses, and that it was our job to go forth alone and defeat him. Not willing to lose another friend, Baji tries to reassure us that we don't need to go through with this and that there's still time to turn back.
Hear me, son! You can always run! You don't have to bear Wukong's name!
But we're here now, and defeating enemies is what we do best. The first phase of this fight is the stone monkey. After beating him, he then covers himself in stones and makes himself even more powerful, requiring us to take him out yet again. After calling in copies of ourselves, we all rush forward and give him a mighty bash on the head, which then prompts him to transform into the great sage's broken shell. After beating his first phase, he gets really angry and takes away all of the 6 senses we have acquired and uses them for himself. Then as we try to take a sip of our god to heal, he immobilizes us and steals a drink for himself first. After taunting us like that, it only fueled our fire and we went on to beat him yet again, this time earning us the Jewel of Destiny trophy. Defeated, Wukong falls to his knees and releases all of the 6 senses back to us.
You must have heard tales about him. Some say he helped Tongue Monk fetch the scriptures, was granted Buddhahood, and stayed on Mount Lingshan thereafter. Some say it was not him who was granted Buddhahood. The real him was already dead on the journey to the west.
Exhausted from the ordeal we had just faced, we dropped to our knees in front of Wukong, only for him to disappear, leaving nothing but his headband behind.
Has ever known.
As the credits roll, we are granted 3 more trophies. 6 senses secured, portraits perfected, and Master of Magic. Now all that's left is some cleanup in New Game Plus, where we needed to grab Page Preserver, Brewer's Bounty, a Curious Collection, Staffs and Spears, Mantled with Might, and finally, that shiny platinum final fulfillment. If you've made it this far, then thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Please don't forget to leave a like if you did, and I'll see you in the next one.